I'm waiting for some kind of indication. There it is. There it is. Yes, now I know I'm really apparently on those. We're really on the platforms live. This is David Rovix, folks, again appearing on your screen. Evidently, if I'm there, broadcasting on the Facebook pages of Popular Resistance and Cable Community Radio, as well as on my own Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels. And this goes out also as a podcast afterwards if you look for This Week with David Rovix, wherever you get your podcasts. And speaking of podcasts, the person I'm once again spending the hour with today has a fantastic podcast called Get Your News On with Ron. We're going to be spending the hour with writer, comedian, songwriter, podcaster, live streamer, and I would say guerrilla marketing genius, Ron Placone from San Pedro. I mean, you are definitely
I don't know about a couple of those, David. I first of all, songwriter, especially compared to you, I do not deserve at all.
You're a great
nice.
songwriter, and also writing a good jingle is definitely songwriting, and you're
all right.
That's not to mention your actual songs are fabulous. But that album, what's that album? 2 years ago, that was a wonderful album. Actually, before I talked to you last time, I was listening to that album.
Agnostic Holiday.
Agnostic Holiday, yes.
Thanks, man.
Fabulous material, and jingles are great too. I mean, if you can make people laugh with that stuff, and you're doing it on Patreon, like putting it out there that you'll write. Are you getting any response to that offer of having?
Oh yeah, people love it, man. I mean, and it's so much fun for me too because I feel like I get to know, like everybody gets to know everybody else better because I do. I mean, it takes me a minute because it's for anyone who's a patron or a Rockfin Premium member. They can get their own theme song. They just have to tell me what they want in it, and then I just add it to my list and I get to them as quickly as I can. So it takes me a hot minute, and then when it's done, I message them and I post it. So some people, it's just about how they love to have a good time. Some people, it's about their job. Some people, it's about their podcast. I've written theme songs for other podcasts. Some people, I wrote a couple theme songs for couples. Like one of them said they might use it at their wedding, and they even said, like, is there a way we might be able to get you out here to play it at our wedding? Which I was like, we might be able to figure something out. You can email me. We'll see if we can work something out. That's very I'm very flattered. That's very I'm honored. So we'll see. But yeah, no, it's a blast, man. Like I get to know more about the people who are patrons, and they get a theme song that hopefully they really like. It's a blast. It's so much fun.
I really love the idea, although I've never, to the extent that I've, known people who have sort of put the idea out there, like, well, I'll record something. It used to be something like, I'll record something for your outgoing voicemail, back in the day. And I don't know how many people really took anybody up on that kind of stuff, but I just love this theme song idea. We could have a collaborative of songwriters writing theme songs for people too.
We could do trade-offs, like we each write each other a theme song.
Oh hell yeah.
That'd be a blast.
That would be really fun, actually. And the Red Berets, I was scrolling through your Twitter feed, and I mean, you're definitely easily one of my very favorite Twitterers, and I'm often noticing your stuff. But you definitely you definitely have a knack with the medium, I would have to say. Although I have no idea how that works. I'm still, of course, all of us who are on Twitter, who are trying to figure out how Twitter works and have been for years. I think those of us who have never really figured it out are sort of fascinated and mystified by people like you who like do it, tweet and then hundreds of people retweet it. It's just this fascinating, completely mystical phenomenon to me. But it's also you're also summing things up in very. I mean, there's a way to be succinct on Twitter that is just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you can even answer this question. Can people answer this question who are so good at it? But how the hell does that work? I mean, it's because it's not just about being eloquent and succinct. What is do you have any idea? You've been, it's not uncultivated, right? It's not something you're just born with. I mean, is it?
Well, I think that I mean, and I can answer the question a little more broadly. Um, you know, I'm not a business person. You're not a business person. None of us are. We're creatives first, but we all have just enough business acumen to do what we do and survive doing it. I think 99% of us, that's the case. Like we figured out enough so that we can do this sustainably. That being said, so the one guy who's like a digital marketing, social media like strategist who I like to read a lot is a guy named Josh Spector, and he loves creatives. Like he started all of his stuff because he's just a big fan of comedy, and he was like producing a lot of comedy and stuff. So that's how I initially found him. And I've since, met him in person and collaborated with him. Like we've done, like I've done his podcast before. And he he's like the guy who writes about that stuff and curates stuff around that I can stand reading. You know what I mean? Like 99% of that stuff where it's just like self-help and how to achieve your goals. And this is, I mean, 99% of it I don't find all that useful, and I don't really care for having it be part of my media diet. He is the exception. And
Right.
one of the things he said that I thought was really valuable is like, so many artists, comedians, musicians, whatever, they try to master every single platform instead of realizing like, well, some platforms are going to really be for me, some aren't as much. And so, but any given platform is going to have enough people that you can reach your, people who want to follow you and people who want to, be fans of what you do and follow what you do. So, for me, like Twitter, for generally for comedians, Twitter is a good one because it focuses on writing, and you want to be like you want to have brevity and stuff like that. So Twitter is typically good for comedians. Other comedians, they've really seen a lot of success on TikTok, which I have not figured TikTok out. I'm on it. I don't really know what I'm doing on it. Um, some comedians, Facebook is still, the big lay of the land for them. For some musicians, that's the case. I mean, some musicians, they still really have this huge community on Facebook. And since the pandemic, they've been doing a lot of Facebook live sessions, and they've really mastered that. And maybe on Twitter, they only have a couple hundred followers because they're not really, doing a lot on Twitter, but they have 50,000 people over on Facebook or something like that. So I think that's good advice. And I think it's just a matter of, I haven't really mastered anything. It's just Twitter is a better medium for what I'm doing, and it's a better fit. So that's the one where I really put a lot of my energy. And yeah,
Well, I mean, I know that you're, it's good to be humble, and also you're not like a rock star. So of course there's lots to be
not.
humble about. But the thing is that I guess what one of the things, and I know talking shop is kind of for a lot of people it's kind of boring, and it's a very limited particular audience out there for this, but it's an audience that is one that I have a lot of like massive amounts of empathy for, because I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are brilliant artists, whatever it is they're doing, songwriting, poetry, or whatever, playwrights, or any number of other forms of art that just don't do social media successfully at all. And then also, many artists who are also perpetually broke, who are not making any kind of a living at the art, who either have a day job or they're, however they're surviving, they're not surviving off their art, even though they're so talented. And of course, there's lots of people who are very bad at it, who are bad artists and good at marketing, and they also have a lot of problems, and sometimes they have
Sure.
success, but usually it's like the combination of talent and being good at what you do and good at marketing is kind of, it seems to me, like the key to having any kind of success, sort of financially, or in terms of survival. I mean, when we talk
Sure.
about success, we're talking about paying the rent, not about, but that's my version of success, right? But
Mine
I
too.
mean, yeah, right. I know, and but I guess I'm just like, can we get into this more? Like, I mean, I have told
Sure.
people like, hey, start a Patreon account. Here's what you can do with it. Here's how it works. And then they still only have two Patreon followers and they're not using it. And they are still having the same problems with not having, not being able to get their stuff out there the way some of us are more able to get it out there.
Well,
I'm
I
not sure
think
what the obstacles are exactly, but there's a lot of them.
sure. I mean, I think honestly, for a Patreon to be successful, or just any type of, I mean, basically a Patreon is more or less a subscription service. You have to have a little bit of a following to begin with, I think, because if no one really knows who you are, you're like, okay, and I create this other content that's behind a paywall. Well, it's like, well, gee, I don't really know who you are yet. I don't even know if I like your podcast or I like your songs or I like this and that, and you want me to pay for stuff and I don't really even know you. So I think like I mean, I would say to somebody starting out who really wants to make a dent online, figure out where your niche is and really try to build something first and then figure out, well, how can I offer value in a way where people would want to pay each month. And I guess I might have taken a different approach than a lot of people did. My Patreon does not have tiers. And I did that deliberately out the gate. Like my Patreon is a pay what you can model because the way I look at it is, you know, there's two types of things you would try to get out of a Patreon. One is, yeah, you need to be able to sustain yourself, sure. And you need to offer something of value so people can justify, hey, I'm going to part with a little bit of my hard earned dollars each month to support this person who I like. And I'm getting something in return for it. Um, but the other one, and I just leaned on the second part more than the first part, and the second part is, really kind of building a community around what you do. And that bleeds into the first part. People see value in that. So for me, it was kind of like, I want to be able to offer theme songs to everybody, not just people who pay at X level. I want to be able to have these Zoom shows for everybody who's a patron, not just, you know what I mean? So for me, I decided I'm just going to do a pay what you can level. And whatever people can afford, that's what it is. And everyone gets all the same stuff. And I'm going to make that clear because to me, I'd rather have five patrons each paying $1 a month than one patron paying $5 a month if I had to choose. And and I think like that's slowly working. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. I'm not begrudging anybody who has tier levels. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way should you choose to. Um, I just took a different approach because for me it was like I really liked the community aspect, like the community building aspect of it even more so.
And I imagine anybody who's actually, seriously into Patreon and thinking about how to do things and they're listening to this, they're going to be thinking, so you're not actually sending people physical merch for
I'm not.
that makes it a lot more workable in terms of not having any tiers, right?
Yeah,
But
I
but
mean,
still, that's
and
so
again,
cool
there's
because
nothing wrong with that. It's just like, yeah, for me, it's just I wanted to make it more about an online community and I wanted that to be where a lot of the value was. Now I will occasionally do little things like if I'm, like if I'm starting like a web store and I got t-shirts, I might open it up to patrons first and maybe it's a little bit cheaper for them. I've done stuff like that. And I've also done stuff like just making my album available for patrons to download. And I'll always do stuff like that, but yeah, like I don't have the tiers where it's like you get this and I'll mail this to you. Like, yeah, I just don't have that.
But if you'll write a theme song to any of your patrons, even people who are just paying $1 a month, that's so then I just love the idea. But are you getting your kind of virtual door getting knocked down with all those hundreds of requests for theme songs, or is it only a very select number of people who really want to have a theme song?
Some people are like they're undecided. Like they're like that sounds so cool, but I don't know what exactly I want in it. And I'm like, well, just let me know when you do. I mean, it's a pretty casual thing where it's like, I mean, people know that everybody can request one, so it's not like no one's ever like banged on my door like, "Where's my theme song?" They're just like happy when it's finished. So yeah, I just knock them out as quickly and as efficiently as I can, and yeah, I'm not overwhelmed.
I hope you don't mind if, people just like, I give you credit, but I got to do that too. Theme song for any of my patrons, that's like,
Do it.
that's too good a thing because I tend to write
Well, all I
theme
ask
songs
in
for
return is
people
I get a free
anyway
one. I get a
from them.
complimentary from you.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah,
I'll write you a
yeah.
theme song. I'm on it.
I get a
I'm on
David
it.
Rovix theme song then.
Excellent. I love it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I get people to send me a little one-page bio. That's kind of necessary.
There you go.
500 words is helpful to have something to go on.
Mm.
Something somebody thinks about. Is that kind of what you're going for when you're writing somebody's theme song? And as far as like if they're gonna provide you with information, is what do you tell them? Anything in particular?
I just say like, what do you want it? Like, what do you want to be in it? And usually they're cool to take it from there. I mean, usually they tell me like, I want it to really focus on my girlfriend so and so. We've been together X amount of time, and we have this we have this cat who we love dearly. And then so some of them are actually more sincere than others. Some of them are like, hey, I have good weed, and if you're ever passing through my town, I know how to party. Hit me up. I mean, so it's and I do it accordingly. Some of them have like been about like authors, like lefty authors and stuff like that, and people have listened to them and they're like, "This is you should just release this. This is just a cool song. Like you should add more verses." So, it's fun. It's fun.
Sometimes have you actually had that experience where you're starting out writing something that is intended to be just like a 1 minute answering machine type of thing, and then it turns into, wow, this is actually a good song. I mean,
It's never happened because I've never taken it to that place. One thing that has happened is somebody asked instead of a theme song for them, they wanted me to just kind of do a riff about like this was right after the election happened, and they were like, just your thoughts on Donald Trump's gone, Joe Biden's going to be president, like I would just like a riff on that instead. So I did, and then after I was finished with it, I was like, I hope you don't mind, I want to share this with everybody. So like that ended up just being a thing, and I've tweeted it since. It's like just 33 seconds about me just kind of reflecting on the election and kind of giving my synopsis of it in like 30 seconds via rhyme. So stuff like that has happened. And then some are a little more public than others because I always make the link unlisted. Um, but I always tell people, I'm like, look, if you want it to be out there more or you want the audio of it, just tell me and I can accommodate it. Like one person, she asked for the audio to be abstracted because she was using it in a radio commercial. She runs a book and music shop up in Vermont. Recycled Reading is the name of the store. So she used my song in a radio commercial. And then other people, it's like it's stuff that they want to be public. And then one guy, I'll never forget this. This one guy, he had me write a theme song for his podcast, and I made this like fun little punky song for him. His podcast is called Podcast by George, and I was like he knows what he's fighting for. You got to get hip to Podcast by George, Podcast by George. And one of his friends sent him this audio of his children, who I think they were these his daughters, and they were maybe like 5 or 6 years old, and they're like just dancing around to the theme song, and they're like, and these little kids are like, Podcast by George, Podcast by George, and I'm like, it's working.
it's working. We don't know what it's about, but we like the theme song.
Yeah.
Great.
So,
And I noticed a wonderful graphic you posted recently that is just it captures the 1960s imagination, and it's the Red Berets. Is this a new organization you've started up, sort of an answer to the Brown Berets, but
Oh
with
no, no, no.
ginger
That
hair? Or
No,
oh.
that's not my organization at all.
Ah,
That is that's connected to a group called Whole Washington, and they are an organization, or I believe they're connected with Whole Washington, and they are an organization up in Washington State trying to get single payer health care in Washington
okay,
State. And I actually wrote a theme song for them. They requested
excellent.
a theme song. One of their members did, so I wrote a theme song for them, and hopefully I'll be able to play it live for them when we finally get up to Seattle. When that whole that thing we used to do, David, that live performing thing we used to do. I don't. Sometimes I forget about it. People remind me. I'm like, oh, that was so fun.
And
I can't
let's
wait
talk
to
about
do that
how is
again.
that going? Because I know we were talking before the show that I put out a announcement that I'm now available to do backyard shows in Oregon and Washington, near home, and I so far I've got no
Every
requests for
West Coast
shows.
state but California. You left us
It's
out.
too far away. Too far. I mean, well, for if they pay well enough, I'll happily make the drive. But in terms of what people might normally be able to pay for a backyard show, Oregon and Washington is more
I
realistic. But
understand. Yeah, that's totally understandable. I mean, hey man, if I was up in Portland, I'd take you up on it
well, nobody
immediately.
has so far. But what's going on in California? Are there actual live shows happening outdoors at least, or
There's a little bit of outdoor stuff happening. I still have just been limited to Zoom. I mean, I'll do a couple. I mean, and again, getting back to the Patreon thing, um, I do a patrons Zoom show every week. Every week, I just do a show on Zoom for my patrons, and I started it because of the pandemic, and I'm gonna continue it. I just like I mean, I
can you
don't
talk
think
about
that
how that works for the people that are out there, the artists out there who are interested in the technical aspects of how do you do a show only on Patreon for your Zoom crowd, like for the folks that just are basically clueless. Can you
the way
can
I
you
do it
run us through that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The way I do it is I announce every week when the Zoom show is going to be, and it's typically around the same time. I do it on Mondays a lot. That's just a good day for me. Um, but I try to mix it up because I have some people who are international and stuff like that. So I'll try to mix it up to kind of accommodate different types of people. And sometimes the time doesn't work. Like I'll announce a time in a given week, and then like barely anyone makes it. And I mean, one time I literally only had like one person there, and so it just sort of
That's
became a
hard.
conversation. I'm like, so I guess this wasn't a good time. I'll pick a different time next time. But how are you? Can I run this joke by you? And it was like whatever. And he's like, will you play? And then he like requested a song that I do that he likes, and I'm like, sure. And I did. Like but so, um, but I announce each week when I'm gonna be doing the Zoom show, and then right before the Zoom show starts, I drop the Zoom link, the link to the Zoom room, and
And it
then
only
I
goes out to your patrons, that link, that when you
yes,
send out the link. So then, and
yes,
then all your patrons will see that in their email inboxes and if they're paying attention and stuff like that.
yep, and the
Excellent.
Zoom link goes to patrons, and then the only other place I drop it is Rockfin Premium. I'm on the platform Rockfin, so all of my Patreon content is also available to the Rockfin Premium members who have a premium membership there. So
And you can make it available there by so that's how you manage to make it available on Rockfin and for Patreon at the same time is basically that
yeah, it's just a link.
doing it with the
Yeah,
link
it's just a link.
to the
I mean,
Zoom.
I don't have Rockfin, like I don't have the Rockfin app on my phone. But the way I do it is I'll just start the Zoom link, copy and paste the link, and then I have Patreon on my phone. I have the Patreon app, so then I just drop the Patreon link or excuse me, drop the Zoom link on Patreon. Then I just get on my computer real quick, log on to my Patreon on my computer, get the Zoom link from Patreon, drop it on Rockfin Premium, and then I just, get ready for the show. I have a little in my kitchen now. There's a little. Even my wife refers to it as my stage. But it's a cutting board, and we've made it into there's a little phone holder, and that is like my makeshift stage. And I'll bring my guitar over there. Even if I'm not going to play guitar, like even if I'm just doing a stand-up set where I'm not going to play guitar at all, I'll still just bring it over there just so it feels like it's a stage. and that's my stage. If I'm doing a club set at a comedy club via Zoom, or I'm just doing my own Zoom show, um, that is my stage. And so yeah, and then I just do the show, and that's something I'm going to continue after the pandemic, because that's the thing. It's like people are all across the country. So it's not like they can see me physically every week, but it's a cool way. Like, I test out new jokes and stuff, and I do new material, and I'll play some songs, and I'll people can even request songs that I do that they like, and we chat for a little bit. I mean, it's a really fun thing. So even after the pandemic, I'm going to continue doing that once a week. It's a way cooler way to work on material than just driving, all around Southern California looking for an open mic or something like that. So why not continue that?
When this is the virtual thing, as they used to call it, is an option, then the whole idea of getting stuck in traffic for hours in order to go to an open mic sounds so much more daunting, right? But
Totally.
I
And
mean,
and I mean, but that being said, it's certainly no substitute for live performance. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not the same. But it's useful in the context that we just described, where it's like, oh, you want to connect with your patrons who live all over the freaking place.
but in terms of the question, and it's like a question that I think that we wouldn't have really thought of in the same way even just a year ago, but the question of exclusivity of your performances, content, live or otherwise. Like before the pandemic, if you're touring and performing, then there's an obvious, exclusivity to everything you're doing that doesn't need to be defined, because it's so completely abundantly obvious. People need to be in that town, and they
Right.
need to have $5 or whatever to pay the cover, and they need to be in the room and watch. So there's all this. They need to be able to get to the venue and be in the town mainly, and maybe they need to have $5 in their pockets or whatever. So there's a certain level of, not very exclusive, but it is geographically certainly very exclusive. And but then when you're doing stuff on the internet, and you're basically always, or not always, but most of the time, in the position where you kind of have to decide who are you doing this for free for a general audience, after you decide what time you're doing a broadcast, or are you going to do something that's more sort of targeted, and then how often and why, I know it's yet again another really geeky kind of shop question, but
Yeah.
how do you come? Can I ask you how you decide how much, in the age of too much information, especially during the pandemic where it's like way too much information? How do you decide? How do you make those calculations, and what are the calculations based on? Because I know it's not entirely based on money. It's also based on lots of other things. Like I'm sure, you don't want to overwhelm people with free content. I mean,
Sure.
there's a place where that's just too much, even if they like it, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, all the stuff I post online is free for consumption, and it's all like podcasts and like sketches that I do, and then I'll occasionally post a stand-up clip, but I don't post a ton of stand-up, because when I go out on the road, I want there to be the element of surprise.
Mm.
And then once I put an album out, I gotta, write a new set. Basically, I retire most of that material, so.
That
um
is the reality for stand-up comedians. I mean, that almost bears repeating. I think it is so significant because that is so different from the reality for musicians.
Yeah, it's kind of fun that way. Although there is a little bit of like overlap, where it's like sometimes if people really like a bit, sometimes they do actually want to hear it. And this is kind of a fun example in that regard. Jim Gaffigan is a very, very famous stand-up. And he actually is at the point where he will do a new hour whenever he goes on the road, but he will come back out for an encore where he will just take requests and do older bits that people just love and want to hear. So that's fun. I mean, I don't do anything quite like that, but yeah, I mean, so I guess, like, to answer your question, like in relating it to Zoom shows, one of the things I've thought about, and again, I mean, I don't know if I will or won't do it, because we haven't reached this point in society yet where we're back to quote unquote back to normal. Although we're not really. There's going to be a new normal. Hopefully it's a better one. But I've entertained the idea of it's a big world out there. I am not going to perform in every place I would like to on any given year. It's impossible. I mean, unless I toured, 12 months a year, which which I'm not able to do. So what I thought is after touring is done for the year, wherever it is I go. I mean, maybe I go to the United States, maybe I do Australia, maybe I do Canada, maybe I do England, whatever it may be. Which by the way, that's why I'm really excited to read your book. I mean, you've done a lot more world stuff than I have, and that's what I want to do next, especially I think if there's one thing this pandemic has really taught all of us, it's just how precious and fleeting life is. And even on day one when I first started, I've always been like, I've always loved to travel so much. It's always been such an important thing to me. And even like the day I started stand up, one of my big goals was someday I want to do the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Someday I've never done it. Like the stars just haven't aligned time wise. I've been to Edinburgh, but I've never done the Fringe Festival. I got engaged there, David, and I still have not done the frickin' Fringe Festival. So,
But I mean, in your situation, there's certainly no reason why you shouldn't. It's just a question of making the time and space for it, right? And I mean,
totally.
which is an interesting another. I mean, more really geeky shop talk here, but it is also, I think, a really interesting point to just dwell on for a moment, because like in the lives of many artists, whether they're musicians or comedians, there is a point at which they may be more successful in different ways, with certain crowds or whatever, than other times, whether they actually have hits or just have success in a certain social movement or whatever it is. These things happen where there's a phase where you might have more of a following or less of a following, and these things don't necessarily go chronologically. So, like, I mean, in my particular case with the global justice movement 20 years ago, the stars aligned so that I know probably had a bigger following than I have had since then in many different countries, and I just happened to sort of take advantage of the situation by doing a lot of international touring at a time when I did not need to, for survival, right? And then I think that happens probably to a lot of artists where they're like, oh, I have plenty of gigs in Southern California without ever leaving here, so why should I go to Scotland? And then by
Sure.
the time you don't have all those gigs, then there's no gig in Scotland either. I mean, sometimes, and just to be bleak about it, that's
No, no,
that's
no,
one way it can go,
totally.
right?
Well, and I think it's also kind of like, what are you really looking to get out of something? And for me, it's like, I want to go anywhere where there's people who might want to see me. I want to go there. And so I just kind of decided, like, all right, from now on, like my touring radius is not just the United States. It is anywhere I can go where people might want to see me. Australia, New Zealand, England, Scotland, Ireland, and even hell, man, I got family over in Italy. There's an English speaking club in Milan. There's an English speaking club in Rome. I'm going to go there and see what happens. It might just be my family in the audience wondering what the hell's going on, but I'm going to try, like,
That is a fascinating little challenge, because, at least from my experience, there is a certain kind of comedy that is only appreciated by expats living in different countries, and so you could be funny for them, and the locals will be mystified, or vice versa. I've noticed that phenomenon anyway. Like, I've been in a room where there was a comedian, and at the Glastonbury Festival in England, and everybody in, like, all none of the English people thought this American woman was funny at all. But there were like five Americans in the crowd, and you could
and
easily
they loved
identify
it.
them all because they were doubling over with laughter, including me, because it was all like, if you were an American who had spent time in England, everything she was saying was hilarious. But if you're an English person who hadn't, had that particular view of yourself from the American viewpoint, it wasn't funny at all. So, I mean, I've seen that happen the other way too. The English comics that just don't go over at all with American audiences, but are so funny for the English audiences. That's a strange thing
Yeah,
with
I think it
comedy. So.
depends on how you make the observation because I've totally seen that work too, where it's like, I mean, and I've seen it like both ways as well. I mean, I've seen, British comedians. Now, in this case, like a lot of times they actually live in LA. So they've had a while to really hone this, perspective, but they'll talk about the differences, and it'll be like a person from England making observations about the States, and it's freaking hilarious because they're kind of like unmasking a lot of things, and it's really, really funny. Um, and I've definitely done that some over there. I mean, I've done sets over there before. Like I've done sets in London, I've done sets in Dublin, but I never like properly toured over there. That's what I really want to do next. And but yeah, anyway, we came like a long way from what I was initially like the Zoom thing. What I was going to say was like, so on any given year, I'm not going to go everywhere I want to go. Maybe I'm only going to go to a couple different countries because my rotation's going to be slower. You know what I mean? So what I thought could be a possibility is at the end of each touring year, being like, hey, if we didn't get to your city, if I didn't get to your city or your country even, we're doing a big online show for all the places we didn't get to. And we're going to do a lot of the material that we're not going to be able to do next year. Because I do a lot of topical stuff. So a lot of times, even if it doesn't make an album, I have to retire a lot of material because it's just not, you can't be doing your material about the 2020 election on November 5th, 2020. You know what I mean? Like, well,
Mm-hmm.
technically, this time around, technically you could, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Generally,
yeah,
generally
generally,
speaking,
in a
you can't.
normal year.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like, you got to retire all of your topical stuff, which is fine. I mean, I don't mind it, but that could be a cool avenue where it's like we do a big online show for anybody who wants to see, what this year's set was, because next year's set is going to be different. So, hey, Australia, I didn't get to you this year, but we're doing a big online show, and then maybe make it favorable to their time zone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where
Do
I
you?
think the online shows can have their value even after the pandemic. By no means is it a substitute, but it has its place.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about how sometimes you'll do an online show at the basically wrong time of day, and you might have just like one person in the audience somewhere in Australia or something
For
that's
my
awake,
patrons, yeah.
right? And when you're just doing a patron show, and you got it. But I'm just thinking with other things that other experiments. Do you have any kind of a way to evaluate when an experiment isn't working and try something else? Is that something that kind of comes up? And I'm just thinking of, oh, I mean, I'm not going to name names or anything, but people who certain folks I'm in touch with, trying to sort of work on social media stuff where like they're getting a lot of engagement on one platform and no engagement on another platform, and it goes on for years, and like they just don't notice that there's just not any engagement going on there, and like so reevaluating how you're posting stuff and what to post and that sort of thing is something that some people are thinking about obsessively and probably way too much, and other people just never notice. And
Yeah. I mean, well, and I would tell those people focus on the platforms that are working, and,
hmm
and don't dwell on the stuff that's not. I mean, I do not have the greatest of presence on Facebook because I don't put a lot of time into it. I mean, I mostly use Facebook for booking purposes, like people that I'm connected with via Messenger. So that's just like my personal page. That's not even my comedy page.
because for a lot of
So
people, it's how they communicate with anyone. So look them
right,
up on
right.
Messenger.
And you can still find out stuff about like different scenes, especially in the United States. Well, and I guess internationally. I mean, really, I found out about spots in London when I, wanted to do a couple spots in London. And so that's like where Facebook still has value to me. But as far as like promoting my stuff, yeah, I'll still drop some videos there. I'll still post about stuff, but I don't really pay attention to much of it. And I guess like, I mean, I guess I could just make the decision to not post there, but it's like I know there's some people that's where they get the content. So, well, I'd rather they see it than not see it. So why not just post there for them, and if other people see it, great. If not, okay. I mean, again, now if I was posting stuff on something like Twitter or YouTube and it's really not doing much, well, then I have to think like, okay, maybe people just didn't like this stuff. But, it's I feel like at the end of the day, it's like if a lot of people are into like if or not even a lot, but if people are into what you're doing and you notice the community growing and you notice people want you to come to their town, well, then you're doing something right. And if every single post on every single platform isn't a home run, in my opinion, that's okay. I mean, some people might not agree with that, but that's my take.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good for people who are not trying to become like sort of professionally neurotic or something, right? Like sort of like obsessed with every possible platform that's out there and how to master it or whatever. That's a great
Well, and
recipe for
kudos to the
guerrilla.
people who can. I mean, there are some people where it's like, yeah, they figured out how to crush it on literally everything. But I think that gets back into what you're saying, where it's like some people, they're just really, really good at marketing and they may not be that great at their craft. I mean, some people have mastered everything and kudos to them. I think that's not most of us. But you know, I think for the rest of us, it's just figuring out where the niche is and just really trying to do the best you can with it.
And then aside from being good at their craft and being good at marketing, in this whole discussion, this whole geeky shop talk discussion, there is another aspect to it that seems to me to be actually at least as important as any other aspect, which is the emotional aspect of. I mean, just informally, years ago, when I was first getting into crowdfunding and what we now just call Patreon, but what used to be before Patreon, the concept of sort of recurring crowdfunding, phenomena or whatever. It didn't really have a name, right? But I got into it and I asked in a sort of poll of, I think it was 30 different musicians that I knew to be professional musicians that I knew, and I asked them all what basically a bunch of questions related to crowdfunding, and the upshot of it is 70% of them said they would not be comfortable asking anybody for money like that. And I mean, and these are all people who are just generally my age, generally, I'm not, this did not include young people, but it was just like my contemporaries from different countries that I knew to be professional musicians, asking them, if the only way you're going to be able to get by in the post merch era is by doing stuff like this, like what I'm doing here with crowdfunding, with Patreon and stuff, what's your view on this? And 70% of them said they wouldn't even try it in the first place. So I
Mm.
mean, we lose. I can't imagine how many people we lose, in the process of in this post merch era when so many people that used to make a living selling CDs of comedy or of their music or whatever on tours, that's no longer a phenomenon. I don't know if it devastated the comedy world to the extent that it devastated the music world, but I assume it was a very similar process of industrial collapse in terms of anything recorded, involving anything recorded, if not live. I'm sure live is a different story, but I wonder, what do you think about that whole question of just being willing to ask in the first place?
Well, I mean, I don't look at it as like you're not necessarily just asking for money for nothing. Like you're offering something in return. Like you're like if you
Absolutely.
subscribe to me, this is what I'm offering you in return. And if you find value in this, I'd love it if you signed up. If if you're on stable ground and whatnot, and have a couple bucks a month you can spare. So I don't see how that's any different than saying, "Hey, if you wanna see me live, this is what the cover charge is. Hey, if you wanna have my CD, this is what it costs." If you I mean, to answer your CD question specifically, I mean, when CDs started phasing out, what most comedians did, and still to this day, is T-shirts kind of took its place.
How did
And
that work out? Any idea in terms of actual sales?
I think a lot of comedians, myself included, I mean, the merch is still a big part of what we do on the road. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's definitely still, people buy T-shirts. You're always going to need a shirt. So it's like you may not have a way to play a frickin' CD anymore unless you're in your car in some cases, but you're always going to need clothing. So
I guess I've just never figured out the logistics of t-shirts when because I guess I do most of my touring in Europe and like I should just get them pressed over there, but I mean with CDs they got smaller over the years, so then it got to where you could you have a box of 400 CDs in one, that you could actually carry. That was like not that big, and then
well, you can still do download cards.
download cards, but
I
the
mean, you can
t-shirts, you
still
can't download the t-shirts. If you're going to sell
right.
t-shirts, you got to have a whole lot of t-shirts with
You
you,
got to
right? I mean,
so
they're
yeah,
bulky.
there is that part of it where it's like you got to check an extra bag and you got to, but it's also, I mean, usually you can sell t-shirts for a little more than a CD too. So
Mm.
I feel like it probably evens out. But yeah, I mean
Okay, so
that's a
really,
tough
really
thing.
geeky question. What's the trick with a good t-shirt? Because all my t-shirts don't sell for shit.
I wish I
How
knew.
have you any?
I wish I knew. If you find out, you tell me. And if I yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's like my t-shirts. I have a t-shirt that says "Howdy Howdy" on it, which is something that I say a lot on different shows. And then it's just this drawing that this musician out of Boise drew for me, and he also did the cover art to my album. I really love his art, and he reached out to me, so I asked him to do some stuff and had him do. I commissioned him for the album cover and stuff, and he's a folk artist out of Boise called Story Grub. Really good stuff too. His music's great too. And so that's one of my t-shirts. And then I have another t-shirt that it's in favor of single payer healthcare, and it says single payer meow, and there's a cartoon of a cat. So those
The
are my
cat.
t-shirts.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I think that's a fun t-shirt. But yeah, so those are my t-shirts, and some people really like them and have to have one. Some people they're indifferent to them, and that's just the way it goes. I had trouble selling buttons actually. I thought it would be really cool to just have a dollar item, but
Right.
no one was really interested. Usually I would just like if people would buy like sometimes people would be like, I want everything you have. I'll take a download card. I'll take one of each t-shirt. So when people did that, I would just give them a couple free buttons. And that was like the role buttons played. But
Yeah, I always liked the buttons idea, but they never. No, I mean, maybe they're just too much associated with the 1960s, and people just can't wear buttons. And
see,
my
I still wear buttons all the time. Every single hat I have has buttons on it.
oh
Um,
great.
yeah. So maybe I'm just, I don't know. Maybe I'm retro and I don't even know it. But yeah, I still
You're
wear buttons.
you're too young to know it if you were retro, I think, at this point, right? There's a certain
I
generation where
guess
you knew it if you were retro because you were raised by people who were hippies in the 60s and you were trying to sort of not be like them, But then over time, that becomes less the case, I've noticed. Like younger people, they're less stigmatized by the association with, the 60s. I mean, I've never been
totally.
stigmatized by that myself, but I've noticed that, my generation was especially this generation of people that were really like even if they were radicals they still wanted to distance themselves from the concept of nakedness and long hair or whatever like, they
Mm,
just they became punks, left wingers but punks instead of hippies,
sure.
this
Well, I
kind of
feel like
thing.
in the punk rock world, like buttons are still alive and well.
That's true,
I
right?
mean, because I mean,
They're
I
just black and white.
always,
You just get rid
yeah,
of the colors, you get rid of those
sometimes.
stupid hippie colors,
Yeah. Well, I have a little bit of everything. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I still like if I'm at like a record shop or something like that, and they have a big, one of those big like trays. Usually, they're like just a big tray full of buttons, and you can get like, like it's a 50 cents a button or $1 a button or something like that. I'll still grab some buttons if I see some bands I like in there, and then I'll put them on like my jean jacket or a hat, or even on my one sport coat. I have a Clash button, and I typically try to always have that button there. It's a Clash, because but
I
I
wonder
don't
how
know.
many other people associate a tray, like a serving tray, with something you use to seed marijuana, to get the seeds out of marijuana. Because that
Yeah,
always used to be what you did with serving trays. I don't know what else anybody
totally.
did with them. But uh, now the pot doesn't have seeds in it, so things have improved in some areas. But I notice that you get a hell of a lot of mileage out of the fact that the Democrats basically suck at running cities, counties, and states like yours in
Yeah.
California. And that's like, I mean, as much as the Republicans suck, your reality there in California, as with so many of us in different parts of the country, is at the state, county, and city level. It's mostly or exclusively in many cases Democrats in power, and you're surrounded by poverty and homelessness and uh, police killing people, and you know massive numbers of people living on the streets in tents with no hygiene. And how's San Pedro doing? San Pedro's May Day tomorrow, and San Pedro has quite a history of labor radicalism, and I don't know how obvious that is today among the
No, no,
tent
it's still
dwellers. Or
there. It's definitely still there. I mean, it's a little more in some kind of circles. It's a little more like establishment dem e, if that makes sense.
yeah,
But in others, not so much. It's very much still. I mean, there is a Joe Hill plaque in San Pedro, and
right.
so that is still very much a part of things here. And I honestly can't even speak to the entire extent because I've been living here since November. So since I've been in Pedro, it's largely been shut down. So I only have so much exposure. I mean, I have my farmers market once a week, which I'm actually going to be going to after this. Um, and so I have little glimpses of what Pedro, really is, and I love it. It's an amazing neighborhood. Um, but yeah, man, I mean, what a lot of people still don't realize, and I know like in shows like this, like we're preaching to the choir, but we have two very far right-wing parties in the United States. I mean, the Democrats, and when I say dem, I mean the establishment. I don't mean all the people who just kind of vote Democrat because their other options are Republican. I mean the establishment itself, the DNC, what the party's really all about. It's a very right-wing party, and most other pretty much all other similar countries, it'd be your farthest right option. Yet here it is the alternative, so to supposedly to the farthest right option. It's freaking nuts. And so people think of California as some progressive utopia. We don't even have healthcare for everybody. We have I mean, we have these ridiculous neoliberal policies that leads to these huge amount of wealth discrepancies. And, we have these pockets where it's like we have San Francisco, we have our LA, where it's like you have this kind of bargain, so to speak, where, well, even despite all its flaws, this is one of those cities where there's resources to potentially do whatever you could ever imagine, especially if you have creative goals in show business or whatever else. Well, some of that is sort of crumbling. Is that still going to be the same after all this? I don't even know. Like, I honestly don't know. And if it is, great. If it isn't, well, I'm going to have to figure out what's next. Um, so
Because
so
actually, like when you talk about Hollywood and TV and stuff like that, I mean, what you're sort of getting at there to some extent is that a lot of the industries are actually leaving because things are too expensive there, right? And they're going to other places where they can find less expensive places to operate.
that, and a lot of people are realizing we live in such a digital age that it's like you don't have to necessarily be there. We can kind of spread it out. I mean, there's a couple things like I think there's a chance, and I don't know this for sure, but I think there's a chance writers' rooms will never be in person again. I think they'll all be digital like forever because it saves a buttload of money for everybody to just be on Zoom. And in some ways that's a good thing. In some ways it's not a good thing, but I think it's the world we live in, I mean, on one hand, it's like, well, the writer's room in person, that is kind of a special thing to a lot of people. It's a big part of the culture of creating film and television, what have you. On the other hand, hey, if you're a writer and you're, like doing okay, gee, maybe now you could afford a big old house in some other place where you wouldn't be able to ever afford a house in Southern California. So you can kind of go and just have, a little bit of an easier way of life. Maybe you can tend to some vegetables in a big old yard that you can never have in Southern California and still be a writer. So, there's pros and cons to it, sure, but I have a feeling that might be the way it is. So, for writing centric people, of which technically I am one, it's like, well, are we gonna need to live in LA forever? I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, if a lot of the production comes back, I would still want to be here because I still want to be involved in production a lot, hopefully. Um, but if it doesn't, then you kind of have to take a look around and be like, gee, I don't, and then the other side of this too is I really love my freaking neighborhood, and my wife loves it here too. So, we don't want to leave. We'd like to stay, but it's not cheap here. And if all those things I mentioned don't really exist anymore, don't exist to the scale that they did before, can we justify California prices? I don't know, you know.
But it is like I think it's maybe I mean for a lot of people, for most people probably who didn't even realize that there was a phenomenon called a writer's room, or that people who write in TV or in Hollywood or in comedy or anywhere that for shows that they actually hang out together in a physical space and write together or and actually interact in that process. I mean, because I think these days with so many people, everybody's online and before the pandemic too, and people might have imagined that a lot of that process with creating these shows, especially when it comes to like CGI and whatever, but other things too, that it would be a more isolating, more sort of lonely process of people with their computers. But what you're saying is that there was much more of a community physical gathering kind of thing going on that was really important for people.
In television and stuff, yeah. Now, me personally, I've never really been part of that. I mean, I've always just been, doing more online centric stuff. That was just where, where I found opportunities. And so like once you're doing something, you're kind of in that world. So, but yeah, I mean, I know other, folks that I know that did more of like the traditional TV writing route. So, a lot of them don't live in LA anymore, and they're just because they're just doing everything over Zoom, and they're established enough that they're like, well, I'm going to be in demand anyway, so I'm just going to stay here. And I mean, maybe it will get to a point where they will come back, but I think there's a good chance a lot of people in that situation won't. So,
Yeah. Very interesting little moment in history. Where,
yeah. And getting back, I mean, as far as like the Democratic rot in California and just all over the country, I mean, look, I mean, I just tweeted this right before we went on here. There's this guy named Miguel Santiago who is apparently helping with efforts for single payer healthcare in California. However, this guy was the same guy who tried to gut our net neutrality bill and make it friendlier for big cable. And he also, in my district right here in San Pedro, we have two lefties running because the guy who is currently in the district, who is absolutely awful, he's a cop. He's going to be running for mayor, which he'd probably be even worse than our current mayor, which is hard. I think our city and your city and New York, and I think they're all having a competition for whose mayor is the biggest asshole on the freaking planet. And I want to say we're winning by a little bit, but holy shit, it's a close competition.
oh man,
I think LA's winning by a smidge, but not by much.
Oh, we got some
your
good
guy
news
sucks.
stories. Yeah, this
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
is
your guy
awful.
sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, they are. It's unbelievable how terrible they are. But in my
But they're
district,
really good at positioning themselves like progressives. In your
oh
district,
yeah,
huh?
oh yeah, they really do put up the
Like for the
facade.
national stage, every time they get national attention, it's for being progressive. And like like
Oh
it's
yeah,
a,
your guy really took advantage of that photo op.
oh
But
man, yeah.
Portland was not fooled. You guys, I mean, when they were like, look at him, he's standing out there with the protesters. You guys were like,
Yeah.
no, fuck him. But so kudos for that. But yeah, I mean, in our district, there's two lefties who are running. And I'm friendly with both of them. So which kind of sucks. It sucks that there's because we don't have ranked choice voting, unfortunately. But there's two lefties running, one big corporatist, and this guy who has a platform and has a following just endorsed the corporatist. So it's like you don't, California politics are very, very twisted, and it's because they have to be so to really uphold what the Democratic establishment really wants. Because people, they see this Democratic supermajority, and they think, well, why don't we have progressive things? Well, we don't, because that's not what the Democratic establishment really wants. So they really have to bend the rules to make sure they maintain their power. And that's why you see things like, the Democratic establishment telling the single payer activist nurses to fuck off and get out, literally fuck off and get out at the state convention. You see that in California because the Democrats can't hide behind, well, the Republicans are so mean here. They can't do that here.
Because
So
they got a
really,
monopoly.
they got a monopoly. So you see the rot for what it really is. And you realize at the end of the day, we have this Wall Street owned duopoly.
That's right. And you got the real estate investor billionaire class. They wear both colors.
Yeah. And they bought both teams.
They bought both teams. Yeah. Ron, it's been such a pleasure talking with you again, catching up a little bit,
It's always a
and all
blast,
the
man.
shop
And
talk.
I'm sorry we really geeked out for like so much
I
of it,
hope
but I could chat with
I
you all
kind of
day. So
intended
it's
to. So hopefully some
okay.
people got something out of it. I know that we weren't going for the broadest audience with that discussion, but hopefully those the geeks out there who are trying to do something with getting content out there in some form will have appreciated the conversation.
Well, I have a question for you. And this is kind of weird going on your show and asking you to plug an event, but you're doing that thing with the Wobbles tomorrow, right?
The Wobblies, yeah.
The
Uh-huh.
Wobblies, excuse me. Yeah. I said Wobbles.
They're wobbling, wobbling wobblies.
The Wobbles.
I mean, they got their name originally. The Wobblies from and one of the stories, one of the creation myths for the name is there was a cook who had trouble saying, "Are you with the Wobblies?" And it said, "I wobble wobble," and people like that so much.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I just yeah. Well, what's the details on that? Because I want to go to it.
Oh yeah,
I know
that'll
it's
be
online, so I can
yeah, you
go.
gotta it's kind of sneaky. I'm not sure what the level of secrecy involved is all about, but you got to
Oh, it's
email
not for
them on the
everybody?
event page. No, well it is, but you still have to email them on the event page to get the Zoom link. They're not putting the Zoom link up publicly, I think, because
Oh,
they're
okay.
trying to prevent Zoom bombing or something. I'm not sure what that's all about,
Well, that's
but it'll be
understandable.
broadcast afterwards. Also as a on YouTube for free, but
Well, and
for
what
the live
time
show
is
you got
it?
to get the Zoom.
Because I know
It's
it's international. So
Oh
what
yeah, it's
you're in
start.
the same time zone as me. So when
Yeah,
do you
so
have
I
to be
know on
there?
the Pacific time it starts at 11 tomorrow morning, and then
Okay.
it'll go. I think I go on at 2 in the afternoon Pacific time.
Two. Okay. All right. Cool. All right.
Yeah, or
Well,
it
I want
might
to
not.
try
I
to catch
really.
some of it
Oh yeah, it should be a
for
lot of fun. Yeah,
My May Day activity.
yeah, and I can send you the Zoom info too. Anyway, you
All
don't have
right.
to email them.
Perfect. All right.
But
I
other
know a
people,
guy. I
anybody's
know a
welcome. They
guy.
just yeah, you know a guy. Yeah,
I don't need to send any email. I know a guy. I know someone on the inside. But
that's right.
that looks really fun. I mean, I know who else is part of that. There's songwriters from all over the
Oh,
place.
great! Yeah, a lot of great folks from Ireland, Scotland, England, and the U.S. The ones that I know of for that come to mind, there's a Scottish performer named Paul Tasker, who's really great. Attila the Stockbroker,
I love that
Rob
guy.
Johnson. Yeah,
We
great
had
bunch of
such a. Did
people.
you listen? I wanted you to listen to our conversation. Did you get to or?
I listened to parts of it, and he
Okay.
was talking about a lot of things I've heard him talking about before. So I I know him a little too well. So I
All
mean,
right. No
he's a
worries. No
great
worries.
guy, and it was very good. But I had talked to him recently too. So
I love
yeah,
talking to him, and I love his stuff. I'm a huge fan. I feel like if he actually lived
me
here,
too.
he would change a couple opinions a little bit. But yeah, I love that guy.
Yes. Yes, I'm quite certain he would. Yeah, his opinions also change, depending on the time of day as well. He's a
Sure.
he's a fascinating, we're all like that, Some of us are just a
Totally. Of
little more
course.
like that.
Hmm.
He can go from like sort of Zen Buddhism to Stalinism in the space of 12 hours, which is a fascinating thing, and it's all well explained though. So it's not, yeah. So,
No, I love what that guy does, and yeah, I was super excited to finally get to talk to him because I've been following him since what was the album with Guy Fawkes Table that he released in
oh
like
yeah,
04
yeah,
or 05. I've been
yeah.
following him since then, so I've been following him for a
Great
hot
album.
minute. I mean, I know he's been around for a very long time, so I haven't been there since the beginning, but it was like I've been following you a long time and have never talked to you, and I'm finally getting to talk to you. So yeah, it was really cool to
Definitely,
talk to him. Um,
definitely.
but
And
yeah, I hope to see him when I get over
Baghdad
there too.
Ska was on that album too, I think, if I'm
Yeah,
recalling.
well, and
Yeah.
he does that big festival over in England. You gotta, man, we
Oh,
gotta
he plays at a
eventually.
lot of festivals, and he,
Yeah,
I mean, he runs a little festival, Glastonwick, which is like a
yeah,
wonderful little few hundred punk rockers who come hang out on a farm in southern England for a
and you've
weekend,
done
and
that,
it's one of many, many times wonderful. And then Attila is
man.
also a very regular performer at the cabaret stage at the Glastonbury Festival. The cabaret stage is booked by Winston Churchill's granddaughter, who is a progressive who really likes
That's awesome.
Attila, and so she books him there every year. And he's certainly done the Edinburgh Fringe, and I mean, he plays all over
See, this
the
is
whole.
stuff I really, man. Yeah, I gotta read your book. I gotta read your book so I can figure out how to do more stuff around the world. And then feel free to mention to these folks if they need an American comic who
Oh
maybe
heck yeah!
maybe no one will be able to relate to. But I'm
Oh
so
no,
available.
they need you. They
I
need you
want to
over
do
there.
that stuff so bad. It's well anyway. Yeah.
Tell me.
Well, no, there's a kind of fun story. Like, so when I went over there, I've only been over to England, Scotland, Ireland once, and it was on vacation. And I did a couple sets, but again, I got engaged. I popped the question there. That was the set I was most nervous about, David. But it went well. She said yes, which I think that
Definitely.
constitutes is killing it, right? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
I mean, if she says yes, like that's like the set couldn't have gone better. But um, but yeah, so I did a couple comedy sets, proposed, wins, and but when we first landed in London, we get off the plane, and of course we're like totally jet lagged, and we have no idea what time it is because it's just like completely cloudy over there, which it is often. And so we were just like, well, it might be like 10 in the morning, or it might be like 5. We don't even freaking know. And it turns out it was like 3, 4 in the afternoon, and we're getting close to our Airbnb, and we're like, well, before we get to the B&B, like I just need a cup of coffee. Like there might not be anything there. Let's just go somewhere and get something. So we literally walk into the first establishment that we see that was close to our Airbnb. And I notice a sign that says live comedy. And then I notice a bunch of ping pong tables. And so I'm looking around and I'm like, baby, this is a comedy club that also has a bunch of ping pong tables outside. So can we move here? First question. We have to live here. That ping pong themed comedy clubs. I'm in love
Right.
and I have to live here. But so I found out we walked into the Backyard Comedy Club in London, which is a very nice club in London. And I'm like, okay. So and everyone was super nice. Like we're just like, we just landed and we and the guy, he's like, oh, you're American, you like coffee, yeah? And we're like, yes. And he's like, oh, don't brew it often, but we got some coffee. I'll brew you some coffee. We're like, yes. And like, so he brews us coffee because it's like 4 in the afternoon, and we're just like, we just landed. We're not up for a pint right now, but maybe after a coffee or two, we'll have a pint. And so I go, I mentioned to the guy, I'm like, look, dude, this is totally random. Like, I just walked in here because we needed a cup of coffee. But I'm a comedian in the States, and I'm here on vacation, but I would like to eventually start touring over here regularly. Can I just leave you like a card or something? And if you want to check it out. And he goes, well, I have nothing to do with booking, but I'd be happy to pass it along. And so I just give him my card, and he's like, oh, thanks, good for you, and welcome to London, and enjoy your trip, and hopefully I'll see you back here next year doing a show. And I'm like, awesome, man. And so then a couple hours later, I get a DM on Twitter from a guy who helps run that club. And he goes, holy shit, you were hanging out at my club? And I'm like, yeah, man,
Great.
I'm on vacation. And he's like, dude, we'll totally figure out having you here. So hopefully I'll be able to do a show there.
I mean, absolutely, because I mean, it's certainly even without having all those connections, that just getting I mean, once you get stuff booked, I'm sure that you know, basically of those 44,000 Twitter followers, a fair number of them are in England, and say that
I hope so.
they're gonna
I
show up and spread the word, and we can work on that. Not
Cheers,
that I
buddy.
know shit about the comedy scene over there, but
Well, I
yeah,
mean, there's a lot of cross pollination, dude. There really is. I
yeah,
mean, a lot of like the,
definitely.
especially over there, because it's like, and you can speak to this way better than I can because you've experienced it 10 times more, but they just kind of foster the arts more over there. Like the way they run stand up. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like in many ways, the United States is kind of like the big stand up capital, but the way we do it is just a little more backwards compared to everywhere else. Like the model they follow in England and Scotland and Ireland and Australia and Canada even, which is they all follow the same model. It just makes infinitely more sense than the way we do it. And so
Yeah.
it's just, and I won't geek out about that because then we'll be getting way too insider baseball nerdy. But
Oh, it's a great little nerdy subject, and I think
it's
about it a
just
lot because I
it's
think like,
peculiar, man. And I'm sure
hmm
music, there's some similarities where it's like they just do certain things. And oddly enough, it's usually all in the name of capitalism, where it's like the United States, not saying that, they don't have their problems with capitalism over there too. Of course they do.
but they
But
support the arts 100 times as much as we do. I mean,
they
on average,
do.
European
And
art spending is
yes,
100 times, I believe the actual number. 100 times. We spend more on military bands in this country than we do on all the other arts combined,
of
in terms of
course.
federal spending. And yeah, the number that I remember from the book Death of the Artist by Bill Deresiewicz, which came out last October, is yeah, 100 times as much art
I
spending.
read it via your recommendation. Yeah, I
Good
read
book,
that
huh?
book. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was
Good info in
interesting. And
there.
and but like, yeah, man, that is just such a stark thing over there. And I know they're having their problems right now because of the whole Brexit thing is fucking everybody over because now, and I don't know if they've resolved it. I hope they have, but I know right now they're dealing with that situation with visas where it's like it'd be
It's a
like if you
big
or I
mess.
had to get a visa to go to Nevada or
Yeah.
something like that. So it's
It's
really not cool for them. Um, Hopefully they resolve it. I feel like they have to because if they don't, and right now, the last time I was paying attention to it, which has been a minute, I'm not as abreast on the story as I'm sure a lot of people over there are, but I know it's like the EU was pointing the fingers at England and Scotland, and England and Scotland was pointing the fingers at the EU, where they're like, we want to work this out. They don't want to. Well, no, they don't want to. So it sounds like they're going to figure it out. They're just trying to play in the blame game right now. So we'll see. But
Yeah, we'll see, and we'll see what happens in Northern Ireland in the whole process too. It's all just a big
right,
mess.
because yeah, yeah, it's mind blowing. I mean, I when I interviewed Attila, we talked about that a little bit. And next time I have him on, I want to talk about it a little more because I'm curious to see how it all plays out. Like, I mean, if they don't resolve it, I think they will. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous right now. But
No doubt. Yeah, we can talk about a lot of other things. There's no question there, huh? But yeah, been a pleasure, Ron.
always, man.
Let's
Thanks so much for
do it
having
again
me.
soon. Yeah.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. And thanks everybody for tuning in to this discussion with Ron Placone, which you can find archived in lots of different places, including at youtube.com/drovix and in podcast form if you look for This Week with David Rovix, wherever you get your podcasts. And as Ron mentioned, I'll be doing a gig with the Scottish and Irish IWW chapters who are organizing something tomorrow, which for Pacific time will be from like 11 a.m. till 2:30 or something, 2 4, or 3 p.m. I believe, and you can find it the info on my Facebook page, among other places, and get the Zoom link if you want to participate live on that. You can just email them for the Zoom link or watch it afterwards. And at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I will be doing a concert for an hour, 2 o'clock Pacific time this afternoon, 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. in England and Ireland, Scotland. I will be doing a show for Community Rights.us, I believe is their website, and you could I'll post something on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube after this is over with the information about that, and also participating on Sunday in a couple different public events with the Community Church of Boston in the morning and in the evening, 5 p.m. Pacific time. I'll be doing a show on the Winnipeg Mayworks festival. Basically, is happening online, and me and Joe Jenks and a whole bunch of other musicians are doing a bit of a tribute to Anne Feeney on Sunday. So lots going on, and I've posted links to most of these things on Facebook and Twitter and my email list and stuff. But that's the basic gist of it. So the next thing is this afternoon at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. I will be back online for anybody who's tuned into that event. And thanks for listening. And remember, mutual aid will get us through. Don't pay the rent unless you really have to. And take care. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.